After 3 years away from the blogosphere, Vlad is very much back. I'd like to talk to you today about humour. I prevented a rape yesterday. I stopped chasing her. Well, that's a joke, by the way. Specifically, it's a rape joke. And it's funny because it makes some people laugh. At least people with a sense of humour. My first day of training to be a teacher, we were each asked our reasons for doing so, and I replied, well, it pays better than the dole and there are good holidays. Later on, I met with my tutor, and she told me that she wasn't sure that was an appropriate thing to say, and asked me how I thought other students' feelings might have been affected by the joke. I said, well, there's no need to speculate. I was having a drink with some of them last week, and they told me they liked it. I was then helpfully reminded that not everyone might have interpreted my remarks as humorous, herself included. I suggested, well, just because someone doesn't have a sense of humour doesn't mean it wasn't a joke. Like most feminists, she decided there and then to make it all about herself, and told me rather icily, oh, my sense of humour is fine, thank you very much. I replied, okay, so what's your favourite joke? I'm sorry? Well, of the jokes you've heard, which one made you laugh the hardest? Well, I don't think now is the time for jokes. In any case, I'm not very good at telling them, or indeed understanding them, it seems, I said. Now, my joke was not very funny. I'd put my life on hold to move to the UK and do this course, and although there was a kernel of truth in what I said, obviously no one would switch careers for reasons that were so banal as a few extra days' holiday. So, moving back to rape jokes for a second. There's nothing like morning sex, unless you're in prison. The essence of the humour here, as with my own joke, is that it shocks our expectations. If you really were a rapist, or the person you were joking with really thought you were okay with raping someone in prison, they wouldn't laugh. But people do tell these kind of jokes. Indeed, for many people, myself included, the funniest jokes are those which are taboo, dealing with racism, sexism, violence, and so on. The fact they're so shocking is what provokes that outburst of laughter. Indeed, one of my favourite Jimmy Carr skits is where he deliberately tells progressively more offensive and inappropriate jokes to a large audience to see where the limit is, and they just keep laughing harder and harder. We don't really have time to discuss why people often find the most humour in the morbid, in death and in violence. My guess is that this is a way of reconciling the fact that we're born into a losing struggle. Life is often something that happens to us rather than with us. And when horrible things happen, sometimes all we can do is turn toward the darkness and laugh in its face. Now, of course, your average feminazi would say, well, there's no disputing that these jokes make many people laugh. But what about the impact on someone who's being sexually assaulted, for instance? Let's say you're standing in a bar and you crack the joke, I called that rape advice line earlier today. Unfortunately, it's only for the victims. I can completely understand why someone wouldn't find that funny. It's the way I tell them. I don't find jokes about women who make false rape accusations funny for similar reasons. It hits you where you live. What really brought it home for me is the recent revelation that the former children's entertainer Rolf Harris is currently penning a song from prison mocking the women who testified against him. Now, this is devastating for all of us, in a sense. This was a man I grew up watching as a kid, a very charismatic man, very talented, and making a satirical song about those who testified against him says he's very much in denial about his convictions and what he did. But for that very reason, most people aren't going to find the song very funny, because he really has been convicted of those things. Although the people involved in the trial do have the freedom not to listen to the song if he releases it. I doubt very much it'll be playing on the radio at their local hairdresser, for instance. The same news piece I saw about the song had a recording of Rolf doing some stand-up comedy, where he's pretending to be both himself and a girl, and he's telling the girl to take her clothes off, and she says, I'm only 13, and he says, this is no time to be superstitious. People laughed at the time because it was funny. But knowing what we do now, it's no longer funny in context when he says it. Rolf also was a close friend of Jimmy Savile, who's the subject of a song called Jimmy and the Sexy Kids by a favourite group of mine known as Cunt and the Gang. That's cunt with a K, by the way. The lead singer in the song claims he's been visited by the ghost of Jimmy Savile, who was attempting to restore his reputation by claiming the kids were just too damn sexy for him to help himself. Once again, the humour in this comes from the parody of his position. Children are never to blame for being attractive to a pedo, and the song is simply an entertaining way to illustrate how deceptively charming the man could be, saying terrible things in a rather jovial way. So if you're a feminist and you're watching these, at the very least you must recognise that there are men like me who are capable of seeing when a rape joke is going to be funny and when it isn't. We don't need to have some kind of blanket ban or safe space. We just apply a little common sense and see ultimately if the joke makes us laugh. Thanks for listening.